Hey guys, this Grandia episode turned out to be a bit longer than expected, so we split it up into two parts. So here is part one of our discussion. Hi, I'm Greg, I'm the lead singer of Lipstick.
And I'm Steve, I'm the bassist.
And welcome to the Lipstick panel. Today on the Lipstick panel, we have a very special episode for you. An episode where we are ranking the soundtrack of a video game that neither Steve or myself have played a second of.
Nope.
So this isn't just, hey Steve, I'm going to force you to listen to the Final Fantasy soundtracks because I'm a Final Fantasy nerd and I'm forcing you to check out stuff I like. I had no idea about this going in. We got this actually as a suggestion from our esteemed guest, the legendary one and only Dreamcast guy, Mr. Max Shcokley, joining us on the program. Max, welcome.
Hello. Super happy to be here and happy to actually dig into one of my favorite RPGs ever from a more musical direction. I'm really excited.
I mean, I'm super excited about this because one of the big fun things about this show is sharing music with other people. So Steve sharing albums he loves, me sharing albums that I love with Steve, but also every now and then we ask our guests like, hey, what do you want to do? What's something you would like us to listen to and experience? And that's why this was super fun for me because I've never played the game. I had no experience with it. The only thing that I knew about the game before you suggested it was there was some dude on a internet message board I used to post on. His username was Ryudo, and that was all I really knew about. I'm like, oh, that's from some game I've never played, and that was all I knew about it. And so diving into this was a lot of fun because I'm a big JRPG guy. This is from that era of JRPGs I really enjoyed, that like late 90s, early 2000s. So It was a trip. Typically, we begin our episodes going around the panel, talking about our brief history with the subject matter at hand. So I'll go first, and then we'll go to Steve, and then we'll go to Max, since I was already sort of going that way. But, you know, I played a bunch of JRPGs. They're sort of my favorite game genre. Light platformers, racing games, fighting games too. But, you know, push comes to shove, if I, can only pick one game genre to play for the rest of my life, it's JRPGs. Absolutely love it. And I'm a big fan of the genre, the tropes, and this is very much a classic JRPG soundtrack, and I looked into the story and watched some gameplay footage after listening to the soundtrack and wanted to see kind of what it was all about, and I'm going to say this soundtrack was so good that it has made me decide I want to play the game. And
yes!
I am going to, it's on my Steam wish list. I just got a used PS3 from my wife for Father's Day, so I'm not in a rush to buy more games on Steam. I want to enjoy the stuff that I already have and take a little bit of time with it.
I mean, the summer sale's going on right now.
Yeah, but I just got a bunch of game stuff, and I'm got pace myself with purchases, but it is on the wish list, and so it is definitely on my to-play list eventually. Maybe like sometime, towards the end of the year, I'll probably get to it, but I was very impressed with the soundtrack. I liked what I read about the story. And so this is something I'm definitely going to dive into and look more into. And I really want to thank our guest, Max, for recommending this to me because I'm very excited to check it out in the somewhat near future.
Yeah.
Steve tells me Grandia doesn't exist.
No, you have to look up Grandia. Did you spell it right?
Grandia?
Yep.
It's weird when I was trying to look it up in Steam. It's because it's all like one word, like the 2 anniversary edition or whatever. So if you look it up in Google, then you'll find it in Steam. It's convoluted.
No, I'm not gonna do that.
Nah.
Well, I can also, so no joke, I'm a huge Grandia collector. I actually have like 15 copies of all the games. So if you want me to send y'all a copy of Grandia 2 on Dreamcast, I legitimately have one sitting right next to me.
So here's the trick. I don't have a Dreamcast.
My gosh, I'm leaving the podcast.
Dreamcast was the system that my friends always had. Mm-hmm. I played like Sonic Adventure 1 and 2, and I really wanted to play Jet Grind Radio, but never got the chance to. But that game always looked sick. And that is basically my knowledge of Dreamcast, is those 3 games. And now Grandia, which, I mean, this is like, the soundtrack is great, and I'm so excited to... Shoot, I might end up getting it on Steam when I'm done with this episode. I think it is on sale right now, so it's distinctly possible right after this episode I'm buying it. But I'm definitely, I don't want to give away too much of my thoughts. I'm going to let the rest of the panel go and talk briefly about their history with JRPGs, Grandia, Dreamcast, just brief history with the subject at hand.
Yeah, yeah.
Steve, you go ahead and go. I think you probably have the least to say. I don't think you owned a Dreamcast, and I think the only JRPG you finished was Super Mario RPG.
So yeah, I was a PC gamer as a kid, and thus did not have any consoles, let alone a Dreamcast. I had a roommate in college who had a Dreamcast, and I acknowledged that Typing of the Dead is probably the greatest console game ever released for any platform. But yeah, I didn't play a lot of Dreamcast. I didn't play a lot of JRPGs. I didn't even actually beat Super Mario RPG. I had it on some random emulator, and about a third of the way through the game, it started to crash randomly, and I just gave up on it. I got about the same distance into Final Fantasy 6. And that's about it for my JRPG experience. I always liked the idea of JRPGs. They always looked really cool, and I like epic fantasy and epic stories, but I never had them, so I never got into them enough to actually play them.
Mm-hmm. I was, growing up, I got into JRPGs when I was like 10 or 11. So I beat Final Fantasy 7, 8, and 9 as they were coming out, and there was like a gap where I got into like shooters for a while. And then I did 10 and 12. And for some reason in 2008, I went through and decided to beat every single Final Fantasy chronologically over the course of that year. I just spent literally every spare second grinding in RPGs. The Grandia series I discovered pretty late. I discovered Grandia in like 2008 or 9, maybe around 2006, but I ended up falling in love with it. There's like 5 Grandia games. And they're all fantastic. I don't know. It was one of those things where I discovered them after the series was probably completely dead at that point, but really fell in love with them because they are such different RPGs. They are more action focused. And I've always they're one of the few games where I really love this soundtrack a lot because it actually has like guitars and synths and like really operatic sections. Like they clearly seem to try and convey more emotion and more like thematic meanings than a lot of RPGs from the late 90s were doing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a hair metal guy, so wild electric guitars is always a plus in the soundtrack.
Yeah.
But I would say it's interesting, this soundtrack in particular, because, I'm very familiar with JRPG tropes, including tropes within soundtracks. And so all those dudes who composed JRPG soundtracks were really into like 70s hard rock, like prog bands. So they were into Deep Purple, they were into Yes, they were into Rush, they were into Genesis, they were into all those bands. And so recognizing all of those, like, oh, yep, there's the Deep Purple elements. Like all of those dudes were so into Deep Purple. It's ridiculous. You can just recognize it all over this soundtrack. But this soundtrack in particular, it's a lot more rhythmic than I was expecting. It's because you with a lot of these soundtracks, there tends to be a really heavy emphasis on melody, and there's still strong melodies throughout. But this soundtrack felt almost as if it was composed by a drummer, because there was such an emphasis on very like tight in the pocket grooves and really locking in those bass and drums on a lot of this soundtrack. And that's actually something that's pretty unique about it in comparison to other JRPG soundtracks, where just how tight and focused those rhythms are throughout this soundtrack. And it's sort of like, a little bit of like late 80s in terms of the rhythm section, but then just a lot of like proggy elements throughout. So it was definitely very interesting comparing it to other stuff in the genre. And it actually is a pretty unique soundtrack, despite also being extremely tropey. It's unique, but also fits within the genre very well. But yeah, you guys ready to get into this ranking?
Yeah. Let's rip it up.
All right, now, for first-time listeners, remember, this is a positive show, so there isn't necessarily bad songs. There's just songs that are less good than others. So we don't say the worst song, we say the least best song. And according to the votes of this panel, the least best song on the Grandia II soundtrack is Root of Evil Destruction. Any comments on Root of Evil Destruction from our esteemed panel?
I feel like this soundtrack in general is really good because it does kind of drag out and do cool songs. So a lot of even though it's looping audio in a lot of these tracks, there are 3 to 5 minute songs. I didn't like Evil Root of Destruction or Root of Evil Destruction just because it is so short. It's like a minute and a half of just like a couple deep bass sounds and nothing else.
Yeah, I mean, once again, I'm glad we have you on the panel because we have someone who actually played the game
and knows what these songs mean.
Right, because I'm judging this strictly from a musical perspective. I don't have the nostalgic attachment to the game. I didn't play 80 plus hours of it. I actually intentionally didn't even look at gameplay footage until I listened to the soundtrack 3 or 4 times so I could really let the music stand on its own and then kind of get a feel for what the game was, but I could still, just because I played so many of these, I had my pulse on kind of the direction it was going. And this song, I mean, it's not bad, and I feel this one is one I'd enjoy more in the context of the game. And if I'd played the game, this would be a track I'd maybe seek out to listen to in isolation after enjoying the game. But because I hadn't, it ranked lower on my list. Because even listening to it 6-7 times in preparation for this, it wasn't really enough to let it sink in and become a favorite of mine. It was just like, yeah, it's solid, but didn't do that much for me in particular.
You know what they should have done with this one to really make it stick out? Make it in 7/4.
Oh man, everything in 7/4.
Just like an esoteric Pink Floyd reference.
See, I
grab those money samples.
Yeah. I've been talking with a bunch of musician friends of mine lately about 7/4 riffs, and I've got in debate with guitar nerds like, is 7/4 riffs good? Like, whatever, just write the song you want to write.
Is the riff good?
Yeah.
Is it in 7/4? Then it's a good 7/4 riff.
Yeah, that's all that it is. But yeah, I don't think we have too much to say about this one, so let's just move on to the next one on the list. All right, we have some discrepancy on the panel. We have opening act next on the list. I apparently liked it the most out of the panel, which should not be the case since I didn't play the game, because this one...
This seems like one that you, Max, would have liked more than the two of us listening to it out of context, where it's all disjointed and doesn't make any sense. But even with knowing how it fits into the animation of the game, you don't particularly care for it.
Well, and that's my thing is that in the context of it, it is fantastic. But this is literally just the audio from the opening cutscene directly sliced out and slapped and called a track. I don't think that they should even put this on the soundtrack, honestly, just because there's so many different emotional notes it's trying to hit in such a short succession. It does not function as a song.
So here's where I'm coming from with this, and allow me to defend myself. So about maybe like a month or so ago, I went to a classical show because a friend of mine invited me to go to the orchestra, and what's going on there?
I think we're getting noise from you, Max.
Oh, good. I'm not sure. Yeah.
All right. Well, whatever. I'll just edit that bit out.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
All right. So I was at the Nashville Symphony with a couple of friends of mine. And I was really analyzing classical music versus more contemporary music, and classical music tends to be about shifting emotions very quickly and not letting you really savor good melody lines. They'll be like, here's an awesome melody, we're only going to play it once. Haha, suckers, moving on to the next bit. And that's always really annoyed me as a guy who likes to really savor melodies, and I enjoy motif and a little bit of repetition in my music. Not necessarily too much repetition, but enough to really appreciate the hooks. This song reminded me of a lot of classical pieces I've seen when I've gone to symphony shows, and how quickly they'll go from this part to the next part to the next part. And even though I have been annoyed by it in the past, I think I've finally maybe drunk enough of the Kool-Aid where I've gone to enough orchestra shows in my life where I'm like, you know what? Yeah, fine. Whatever. Don't even give me time to enjoy that hook. Just move on to the next thing. Let's just roll with it. And so because I imagine this being performed by an orchestra, as if I was at the show I was at a month or so ago and the orchestra played it, it would have fit in mostly well. there are a couple more modern elements to this piece that would not have fit in that setting, but a lot of it would have. I'm like, you know what? This reminds me of just a great classical piece that I would have, gone to the symphony for, and so that's why I enjoyed it. I'm sure it's even better in the context of the game.
Yeah.
But that's my defense of why I liked it. And I'm going to be honest, I enjoy it every time I listen to it, as weird and wonky as it is.
It definitely is one of those things where if you get a sec, it's literally the very beginning of the game. If you just watch the opening act of it, I feel like it, in context, it is fantastic because it really is. It kind of tells you like 300 years of history in 60 seconds. And that's why it constantly just jumps from different style to different style. So, but yeah, it's definitely easy to love if you can get in the frame of mind for it.
All right.
Interesting.
Well, next up on the list, man, more discrepancy. I apparently like this way more than you guys. We have Ryudo Awakens, Prayers of the People.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so why do you guys hate this song so much?
Didn't you literally just say that this is all about positivity and not hating things, Greg?
Well, look, I am positive about it, but apparently you. Hey, I read your notes that you emailed me, sir.
It's true. I ranked this one as absolutely the least best song on this album.
Mm-hmm.
Just by this point in things, it seemed like the climax. Like I when I listen to soundtracks like this, especially having not played the game, I try to recreate the plot of the game in my mind. Like, how would this actually go? And by the time it reached Ryoto Awakens, I was just like, all right, you've reached the boss. Valmart has revealed himself to the world already. Just fight him. Just have the big climactic fight now. Maybe have a couple of mini fights and some intermingled songs if you really want to do it that way. But don't just keep dragging it up like, here's the big bad boss. Here's his dragon again, by the way.
See,
here's the boss some more.
I listened to the soundtrack the same way, but I dug it. I just viewed it as build-up where, I haven't played the game and I only briefly skimmed the synopsis. So I don't know exactly what goes on in the story, but what I sort of pictured with this was Ryudo got cast, some spell got cast upon him and he fell asleep and, Valmar has awoken and needs to be defeated. And so the prayers of the world and this hymn that's sort of a motif from other songs on the soundtrack is sung on this song, but it is sung better than it is on those other iterations on the soundtrack. This is sort of the best version of that piece. And, he awakens through the prayer of the people, kind of like the hymn of the faith in Final Fantasy X, where everyone's singing to lull sin to sleep. But this is singing to awaken the hero and, take his heroic stand. Once again, haven't played the game. This was just my interpretation listening to the soundtrack. But I liked that narrative that I built in my mind. And once again, I thought this motif of that hymn was done better in this track than in the other ones. So that's why I ranked it pretty high, like low mids on the soundtrack, but still, way higher. But I definitely enjoyed the piece.
So you're saying Ryudo is the Mustakrakish, the ancient Finnish troll?
Yes, sure.
He needs to be sung awake.
Yeah, that sounds legit. Yeah,
I understood that reference.
I have that drop somewhere.
The only reason I put this low on my list is that I feel like this soundtrack in general, the more it tries to go hard, it sounds so good. I like when they throw in lots of random guitar riffs and then just random, like, just belting out heavy screaming in a couple of tunes, like real hardcore singing. This is one of those ones that feels really muted. And that's the only reason I put it so low on the list, is that it's not at all bad. It is an amazing track, but in such a high energy set of tunes, this one feels so much more restrained, and that's why I didn't like it.
It's like when you go to a Kiss show and they're like, they're playing Beth. All right, I'll mellow out for 2 minutes.
Rock and roll!
Exactly. Not metal enough. Not enough metal in this track. If there was a sweet guitar solo right in the middle, then maybe.
that's all it needs to be like, oh man, it's time to awake from your ancient slumber.
I can get behind that, but
guitar solos make everything better. Although, if this album had guitar solos, it would have been 3.5 hours long.
Oh god, yeah. Oh yeah.
It would have been, man, we need Vinnie Vincent to do the guitar solos on this.
He would just play one single take through the entire album.
That'd be amazing. I'd buy it. I'd give him my money now.
I understood that reference.
Well, all right. So next up on the list is the one I ranked as the least best song. We have Garmia Tower next on the list. It was just way too short for me to really care about.
Yeah.
That's entirely it. Like, oh, this was like 4 seconds. All right.
Yeah.
It's a little weird that this one's low like this because, yeah, it is just a brief sting. It's just like, here's an accent mark, a thing happened. But like when we did the Final Fantasy 1 episode, the victory music, the da 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 da, even that part, it's 4 seconds long, and we all rank that high just because it's iconic and we all like it.
Well, I mean, there's, I think it's tougher to make a 4 second piece that is that brilliant. It's, with this composer, I'm blanking on the guy's name, and I'm sure people in the comments section are angry and furious with me. But, it's when you're comparing someone to Uematsu, who is quite possibly the best composer in video game music, anyone next to that isn't going to look as good. It's like when you're comparing any other band next to the Beatles.
Noriyuki Iwadari.
Yeah. It's hard when you're comparing someone against like the absolute best. So even if someone is very good, it's going to be they're going to be tough shoes to fill. And so the way I look at this soundtrack is a lot of it is stuff I wouldn't necessarily recommend to people who aren't fans of the genre. So if you're not into JRPGs and you're not into video game music, this soundtrack isn't for you, in the same way that I wouldn't necessarily recommend Danger Danger to someone who isn't a fan of hair metal. So it's not like Bon Jovi. We're like, oh yeah, everyone loves Bon Jovi. I
understood that reference.
Yeah.
Greg told me ahead of time he was going to sneak a Danger Danger reference in
there.
Yeah,
that's where it's going to be. In the sense that Bon Jovi is like the Final Fantasy soundtrack. Pretty much everybody likes it, even if you don't really like the games. This is more for fans of the genre. So if you like the genre, you're going to love this soundtrack. The same way, like if you like the genre of hair metal, you're going to be like, yeah, Danger Danger. Bang Bang is such a catchy song. Why wouldn't you like it?
I think just on the subject of this track specifically, there's a little bit of problem of there are a lot of scenes in this game, just to provide a tiny bit of context, where you're basically walking into a room and seeing part of Velmar, which is the devil, like awaken. And they're literally scenes that last about a minute. So they end up making tracks that are like 15 seconds long and loop because it's going to be such a short scene. They know you're not going to get tired of it. And so just listening to those on their own, it's definitely just like, check out these cool couple notes. Okay, cool. Next track. It's like, oh, what? It didn't get a chance to sink in. So yeah, a lot of those I ranked low on my list because they're so short, they're hardly songs.
Yeah, and I can see that. I'll give credit to other OSTs that I've purchased in the past where when they do go on a loop like that, the physical CD, they'll make the track a little bit longer. They'll at least go on for a minute and give you
add
more
a guitar solo,
or something. And so maybe that's just a problem with just the version, that they decide to release of this OST.
Yeah. So if you have, I actually have. So what I've always found interesting about Grandia 2's soundtrack is when you buy Grandia 2 on Dreamcast, they actually gave you the soundtrack. I actually have the soundtrack in my hand right this second.
But that was one disc, right?
Yeah, and it's just 12 songs, and it's literally the ones that Noriyuki liked the most from his own work. So it's literally just like 2 of the fight songs and a couple of the big like boss fight encounters and some of the hymns. And he just leaves out a lot of these smaller tunes that he built for the environment, but not so much for the melody,
And I think that is actually
it's a good way to do it.
I actually disagree because I think there's so much good stuff on this soundtrack that if you limit it to 12, you're leaving off a lot of really good tracks. I honestly believe that. So, I'm not looking at that track listing, but if you're just doing the fight songs and you need the hymns, but also you have those great town themes.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't want to leave any of those off. And there is a song on this soundtrack, which we'll get to later, that was so beautiful it almost moved me to tears. And so if that song wasn't on the soundtrack, I'd pull a Jesus and flip a table like, what are you doing?
Well, that's why you have a shortened version, so that the fans can bicker about what got left off, just like with greatest hits albums, right?
Yeah, so then you can...
well, why would they exclude this one? That's the best album. Like, yeah, it's a deep cut that only nerds like you like, though.
How can they have a Megadeth album without Peace Selves?
I mean,
Hindsight is always 2020.
So let's go ahead and move on to the next song on the list.
All right, I'm done talking about this crappy song.
All right, that is a drop. That is not me. That is from a
That was a good.
One of these episodes, I'm going to forget to do that drop, or Greg's going to forget to point out that it's a drop, and it'll be great.
I've been very good. What is that from the Gish episode?
Yeah, I think so.
That's probably.
Or it was from the next episode where you were talking about Gish again.
No, I don't think I was saying bad things about Siamese Dream, because Siamese Dream was great, and I don't know if I would say that about any Kiss. Well, no, we haven't gotten to that song yet.
We haven't gotten to that song. Spoilers.
You're gonna like it just because you like up-tempo things, and I'm gonna be so angry.
Yep. Anyway, tangents.
I'm
done talking about this crappy tangent.
All right. Next up on the list, That Which Lurks in the Darkness, version 1.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Let me scroll up to my block of That Which Lurks in the Darkness notes.
Yeah, so when we did the Final Fantasy episode, we did Final Fantasy 1 and 2 for this podcast, and we'll probably do all of them despite Steve's fears once we get into the longer soundtracks.
Yeah, I do not want to do a 4-hour soundtrack. Jeez.
Yeah.
But one of the things that with those soundtracks, there's a lot of motif and a lot of repeating melody and a lot of different arrangements of the same songs. And on those soundtracks, there was a very wide discrepancy, for my voting at least, between different versions of essentially the same melody, where I would like one arrangement a lot and rank it really high, and one arrangement I wouldn't like and it would rank really low, and there's a huge discrepancy. In this soundtrack, I didn't have that big of a discrepancy between the three versions of That Which Lurks in Darkness, and neither did Steve. But Max, it looks like you had much more discrepancy between the different versions. So I want to get your thoughts on this track first.
Why is this the worst one?
I think it's just that each one of them has a real sense of refinement to it, where each time it almost feels like he fully composed the song, recorded it and all, and then later on when they're revisiting a moment that's sort of that same sort of methodology to it, they decided to go back and record a second version of it, and each one of them sounds a little bit cleaner and a little bit heavier. And so as they go on each of the mixes of it, I like that a lot. I feel like they each have a heavier tone, whereas the first one, it feels like the rough draft of a short story. You know, it's just kind of like, hey, whoa, 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 and then it's just end of track.
Yeah, so it's like progressively descending into darkness. That which is lurking in the darkness is lurking even more.
Yeah, because like, not spoiling anything about the game, but you were pursuing literally the devil is awakening piece by piece. They beat him 1,000 years ago, chopped him into a bunch of bits, and each part of him is slowly awakening and reassembling. So you're actually chasing the devil, who, like, the wings of the devil, the tongue of the devil, the heart of the devil, and it's slowly coming together. And so I like that.
It's just like Tail Concerto.
I was just going to say it's just like Voltron.
Yeah, exactly. He's a demonic Voltron with a huge tongue, and I like that.
So
it's demonic Voltron with a huge tongue is my new metal band name.
So just Robo Gene Simmons.
Yeah. Oh, and it's funny because you guys, without even knowing, you're definitely hitting on, for no reason whatsoever, a giant mech definitely does show up at the very end of the game, and you have to fight.
I mean, once again, I'm very familiar with the genre and the tropes.
When you say for no reason at all, are you discounting the fact that it being friggin' awesome is a reason?
It is, yeah. I mean, it literally turns into a giant robot that talks. It grows 5 mouths, and each one takes turns talking trash during the fight. So it's one of the things where it's like, okay, cool, yeah, I'm on board with this.
That's
this
pretty
is a roller
sick.
coaster. I'm on board.
So, for reference, Steve is likely not to play this game because
Probably not.
he is just.
I don't have hundreds of hours for JRPGs anymore. I'm a grown-ass man.
Yeah, and me, I play JRPGs with my wife, so it counts as wife bonding time, so I will play this game.
That's the shortcut.
Yeah, that's the trick.
I need to get a girlfriend so that I can play video games. I don't play enough video games. I need a girlfriend.
But I will say this: since Steve is never going to play it, and I'm a guy who actually actively looks for spoilers, I'm the kind of guy who I want you to spoil something for me, because if I think the spoiler is cool, then I'm more likely to check it out. It doesn't ruin it for me. I'm like, oh, sweet, that sounds like it's actually worth my time to check out. So like, you know, please tell me who dies and all that stuff. I'm all about spoilers.
We'll do 30-second spoiler warning. So for the next 30 seconds, I'm going to spoil everything.
All right, do it.
Okay, now that everybody's been fairly warned, basically you're hired by the church to try and kill the devil. It turns out that the church all along knew that the devil was awakening, and they didn't care because the Pope literally turns out to be the last part. The heart of Velmar is inside of him. So at the end, when you actually fight the last boss, you're like, oh my gosh, it was actually the Pope all along. And he turns into a giant mecha Pope, and each of his mouths does a different kind of magic. So literally, like, the robot will have all these heads that'll open up a mouth and be like, I absolve you of your sins. And he'll heal himself, or he'll be like, we'll cleanse the earth with water. And it causes the great flood, which like drowns your party for 30 seconds. And it's like one of those things of like, I don't know why this happened, but I love it.
That's pretty great.
You had me at Mecha Pope, honestly.
It's so well, and that's why the final, when we get to the final battles track, that one's so good, because it's just literally like, yeah, you're fighting Mecha Pope.
I'm gonna be honest, if I had known that track was fighting Mecha Pope, I probably would have ranked it higher, and I still ranked it pretty high.
Yeah. Well, I will say, like, non-spoiler wise, this game actually can be beaten in about 16 hours. There's only one side quest in the entire game. It is very linear, but that's part of the reason I like it. Is it's definitely like a beat it in a weekend RPG, which there aren't a lot of in that time period.
See, so Steve, you might be able to play it, but also you just got it spoiled, so you won't.
Maybe. Although one of the reasons I did not like Final Fantasy X, I didn't actually play it, but I watched friends play it at, you know, parties and things like that, was because of how linear it was. Yeah. But if it's 16 hours of linearity, that's not as bad as, you know, 100 hours of linearity plus another 200 hours of blitzball.
And it's, yeah, and I've written about this game several times before, and in my videos I usually refer to it as comfortable linearity. Like, you are so eager to see the next event, you don't exactly feel like you have a cattle prod forcing you forward so much as you're willingly walking towards the next event.
I mean, yo, dog, I liked FF13, so linearity's fine with me. Just let's roll on this train.
Yeah, final hallway.
Hey, I you know what? For me, I'm playing JRPGs primarily for the story, the soundtrack, and visuals. Gameplay is always like a distant, like, 6th or 7th place. Like, whatever, it doesn't matter. So for me, it's like, oh, do I like the story? Yeah. Do I like the characters? Yeah. Do I like the visuals and music? Yeah. All right, cool. Oh, whatever. I'm not this dungeon doesn't have that many branching paths. Whatever. I'll get to the story faster.
Yeah, exactly.
So here's the trick. Diablo 1, an RPG I have beaten, can be beaten in about 6 minutes. So how does this compare to that?
I will say, like, you can, whereas like speedrunners could beat this game much faster. Even though this is thousands of times, technically, it's longer than 6 minutes, but worthy of more than 6 minutes.
That fair enough. Well, I think we're ready to move on to the next track. Next up on the list, we have Sky's Reminiscence as next on the track.
I didn't even write that joke down. I thought that joke, but I didn't write it.
I thought you did write that joke.
Did I? Maybe I did.
All right, so since you had the joke, I'll let you go first.
Oh, right. My notes consist entirely of I liked it better as Stairway to Heaven. But, wait, I have a... There we go.
Nice.
So this song, when I got to in the soundtrack, it was surrounded by a bunch of other really good material that I liked a lot. And I think that's sort of my, if you're looking at the track list, and that's where most of my favorites came from, was around this area. This one was one of the lower ones from that area, and so it's still good, but it definitely broke up the momentum of what I thought were a bunch of really good tracks all in a row. But it's still not bad. I feel like this is one of the ones that's better in the context of the game.
Yeah.
Like, when you see whatever dialogue is going on during this scene, it reminds me of, maybe Cloud and Tifa talking about something really emotional and resonant about their past or something. So it's that kind of melody and that very bittersweet, emotional vibe that JRPG soundtracks capture so well. But for me, the melodies weren't as strong as a lot of the other pieces, so that's why I ranked it a little bit lower.
Yeah, and that's what my thing is too, is that it's part of a nice flashback sequence, which is great, and there's like a talking bird in this game for no reason whatsoever, and this is
because
the
it's
talking
awesome.
Again, yes, because it's awesome.
Yeah, hello, welcome to Japan. I'm a talking bird, and it's basically the talking bird's flashback, and I feel like it's purposely very subtle with lots of like undercurrents to it. So listen to it on its own. I'm kind of like, yeah, it's one of those things that it doesn't get my heart pumping, but it also doesn't just like make me sit there and think. It's kind of just like half of a song.
So if the composer was an old school prog and rock nerd, and this song is specifically a bird reminiscing its memoirs, Stairway similarities might have very well been intentional, actually.
Yeah, very likely. A lot of musicians, myself included, will sort of take a different song as a base in terms of the vibe. Like, you're not trying to rip that song, but you're trying to capture the vibe of that song. And so maybe he was looking at Stairway and like, I want to capture the vibe of the beginning of Stairway and extend it into like a full ballad.
Yeah, but it's interesting I'll say it because obviously I consider myself a writer first and foremost because I write so many scripts, and I've never heard anybody describe music that way, but that's actually how I handle writing a lot of times, which is I'll like read a book or read a piece or read like an investigative note that I think is interesting, and I'm like, oh, I like that tone, I like that opener, and so it's like, well, I don't copy it, I definitely get inspired very directly by it.
There's a quote I like to attribute to myself, which goes, "Good artists borrow, great artists steal."
Yeah, it's good. It's good.
Yeah, but yeah, I think that's definitely, I think it's very common in the arts where you look at something as a base template, as I like this thing that this person did, but I don't want to just copy it, but I like the emotion it brought out of me. How do I capture that? So there are certain songs where I'll say, I want this song to have a certain swagger and a certain vibe to it, but I'm not directly copying any one particular song, but I might use that song as like saying like, this is like the kind of beat I'm feeling for this track, or just the vibe.
Except you never say that in public anymore. Or, what's the name? Green's estate will take all your money.
See, it's so, Marvin Gaye.
Marvin Gaye.
Yeah, because Al Green is still alive, and thank goodness, because that dude is amazing, but also, sad for Marvin Gaye. But tangents, that is such a new development where for years and years and years and years, every musician would say, yeah, I got inspiration from this song from the 60s, and then I turned it into this. And that's what everyone has said for years. Like, this inspired me, and then I twisted it into this. And so that is a very troubling legal precedent. And also all those bands who said that, like, oh, you all could be sued now.
Right.
Basically every single band ever.
That's not true. Every single band since, the 60s.
Right.
Because older stuff's in public domain. You're allowed to be like, yeah, I totally ripped this off from Greensleeves. Nobody's going to stop you. Unless it's Peter and the Wolf, then they might get you. But
anyway, I'm done talking about that crappy tangent.
Esoteric copyright law things.
And that's the
We're not lawyers.
I'm a paralegal.
Oh, yeah. You're not a lawyer, but...
I'm not a lawyer, but... I know about the law, I'm just not allowed to tell you about it.
Right.
Next up on the list, A Farewell and Decision.
All
right, once again, I liked this the most out of you guys, and it's pretty much falls into the same category as Ryudo Awakens, where it's building up to that final battle. And this is just, me imagining the characters having resolved to go about and complete the task that they need to do to save the world, and done with very pretty music. And so this was building up the stakes for me, where it wasn't like, I'm trying to think of the right emotion, where it's not like there's tension, but it's more just like a quiet, somber reflectiveness of just knowing what you need to do. Kind of like, a similar emotion I think other people would think is when you have a toxic person in your life and you need to cut them out just for your own health and well-being and just to move forward with your life. and you're not really like tense about it, and there's not like the, this great anger or anticipation, but there's like this quiet sadness and somberness.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the kind of emotion they're capturing, where it's like we're not scared necessarily. It's just we're sad because we know this thing is coming, and you know, there's going to be, and that's what I sensed from the track, and I really enjoyed it. Once again, it resonated with me musically, and I very much dug it.
We're getting into the spot of my list where this stuff, I feel like I love all this stuff. It's that we're coming up to the part where I basically put all the town music coming up. And this is the one that was right beneath my bulk of the town tracks, because I think this is probably some of my favorite town tracks of any RPG ever, because every one of them is so catchy. And this was just right beneath it because it's not quite as catchy, whereas still a phenomenal song that manages to pack so much emotion in. It just doesn't quite have that like foot tapping rhythm to it, and it also doesn't really have that same like oomph that some of the later tracks have.
Yeah, I mean, it's very much in the JRPG bittersweet emotion category, where those songs are all about like, hey, does this melody make you feel kind of sad? And that is like completely what they're going for. And for me, it worked. I think Steve was just annoyed that they didn't get to the fight already.
Just gets the effing monkey.
Steve's just like, I just want fights.
Fight already. Fight, then kiss.
Steve's like that guy who's really upset that it took so long to get to the final fight scene in Rocky.
Right?
Like, why are they fighting yet?
Why are they punching right now?
Why do I have to wait to the climax for the fight?
I'm really disappointed that you cannot buy a DVD of the Trump edit of Bloodsport yet.
What?
Have you not heard of that?
No.
There's some journalist who was like riding with Trump somewhere, and he said, "This is the best movie of all time." Pulls out a copy of Bloodsport and puts it on, and starts fast forwarding through all the non-fight scenes. Which, I'll be honest, that sounds like a great film. Bloodsport, just only the Kumite parts.
But in fairness to Bloodsport, there's some great stuff in the rest of the movie.
I know, it's an enjoyable movie overall. I just like the idea of that film edited to only the violence.
You know, Cobra would also work that way.
Yeah.
I have a friend who's obsessed with bad horror movies, but all he ever does is just like watch the horrible slasher scenes because they're just so obviously like syrup and plastic knives. And so all the time he used to come over to my house with these like VHSs that he had edited himself, where it's just literally like, all right, now this one's about these teenagers who get lost in the woods, and all these little like tiny dolls come to life, and it's possessed by a million African spirits, and they kill them, and it's obviously like actresses laying on the ground with puppets on their neck, being like, "No, stop killing me!" It's like, why are you spending so many hours on this? Like,
that's amazing.
Sort of reminds me of that, yeah.
I will admit, when I was a teenager, I made VHS tapes where I just got all my action movies and Dragon Ball Z movies and just made a compilation of just the fight scenes, and I labeled it Fight Remix.
That's like, awesome.
I'm like, you know what? I just want to have just a VHS tape of just all the fight scenes from all my favorite movies and just pop it in, just like, yep, fight scene after fight scene.
Dude, that feels like YouTube before YouTube, of being like, you know what? I want to get myself hyped up. I'm going to watch the greatest warriors of every piece of fiction punch each other in the face for 45 minutes.
Yeah,
there's thousands of hours of that on YouTube.
And I thought to myself, like, because this was like 2004, 2005, and that was sort of the era where there was just like all kinds of really crappy like DVDs you would see in stores, or like compilations of random movies. I'm like, how did no one do that? Just make a DVD of all fight scenes.
All the fight scenes from every public domain film they could get.
Or not even just like, because a lot of those like cheesy 80s action movies, the rights for them are very cheap.
Yeah.
And if they're just buying the rights for one scene, if they just get a bunch of those, I am convinced those would sell really well in like the $5 bin.
Just like just a disc of 90 minutes of Reb Brown punching.
Yeah, if I saw like a DVD,
film labeled that.
If I saw a film labeled that in 2005, I would have bought it immediately.
I mean, it would be at a gas station nowadays. You might still see it,
right?
I'd back it on a Kickstarter right now. That's not like a project I'd do. Yeah.
I'm a $30 level backer on 90 minutes of Reb Brown punching things. I do not recognize the irony of this decision.
The more we're able to crowdfund, the more fight scenes will be. If we reach the $1 million level, we promise that this will at least be 6 hours long of pure punching.
If we reach the $2 million level, we'll be able to hire Reb Brown to do a commentary track.
Yeah,
It'll mostly
$3
just be
million. We'll make an entirely new movie for $3 million at the end of the compilation.
The more we talk about this, the more I want it to be a thing.
I know.
Somebody contact the Spoonie one. I bet he can make this happen.
Well, as much as I want to keep talking about that, we've got a lot of songs to go, so I'm going to try to keep the train rolling. Next up on the list, we have That Which Lurks in Darkness mix version. I like this the best of the three That Which Lurks in Darkness. I don't know, I liked the mix the best. So this, why was this your second place one of the three, Max?
It feels like it's overly layered somehow. Like, I actually like version 2 the most because it feels like, and on my translation of it, it's called The One Hidden in Darkness for some reason. But the Ones Hidden Within Darkness mix version, I don't know, something about it seems, it doesn't seem as resonant to me. I can't explain exactly why, but it just seems a little clunkier than version 2.
For me, I think it's richer sounding. I think version 2 is the most menacing of the three.
Yeah.
But this one is a bit richer for me in terms of just like the production sounds the best on this track. Steve, which one did you rank the best of those three?
To be honest, I ended up ranking them in chronological order. I think I ranked this one lowest of the three just because by the time I listened to it, I was just kind of done with them playing the same song, and they're spaced far enough apart on the disc that unless you're going back and listening a number of times or listening to them back to back, it's hard to notice the differences. Mm-hmm. So overall, I thought that was a mediocre, menacing villain theme. The name makes it sound like it's like some Lovecraftian cosmic horror, but the melody itself sounds more like Jafar from Prince of Persia. This is not a good tune for Valmart, God of Darkness.
I don't know. I was fine with it. I enjoyed it musically, but three different versions on the same soundtrack were definitely a bit much for me. Because the differences weren't significant enough for me to really feel like three different versions were justified.
Yeah,
are they really not. Are they three different mixes, effectively, or are they three different arrangements?
Three different arrangements, but this one called mix version for maybe it's sort of a mixture of the two arrangements.
Yeah, and that's what I didn't like about it specifically, is it definitely seems like he particularly arranged and recorded 1 and 2 separately. It kind of has that vibe, and then the mix version I feel like you can almost see the scissors and tape that put this together.
It's a mashup?
Yeah, some YouTuber put these together. Like, guys, I messed up That Which Lurks in Darkness 1 and 2.
It's called a mix version. Don't steal it. It's original content.
Yeah.
OC, do not steal.
We got 20,000 views the first day.
Yeah, right.
All right, I think we can move on because we'll talk about the other version later on the list. All right, next up on the list we have Elegy.
Mm-hmm.
Steve and I both ranked this pretty low. Once again, this is mainly just the music didn't do that much for me. In the context of the game, maybe these would tug at my heartstrings more, but just listening to it in isolation as a piece of music, it was just okay for me. It didn't do that much for me.
I ranked it pretty high. I put it 22 on my list, so halfway up actually. I don't know. I really like I would say like the floatiness of it. Something that has a real like airy lightness to it that I really like. It really stands out amongst all the rest because this is such a mix of like sort of hard rock and then sort of darker like tracks. And this one sort of just stood out so much that for some reason it really hit a note. I like it a lot.
I mean, I did like the Gary Moore-esque guitar playing sort of going on in the background, but it was just usually with music, my number one important thing is melody. That's like pretty consistent across whatever type of music I'm listening to. That's like 80% of the time what I'm going to care about the most. And this one just didn't have that strong of a melody for me to really latch on to in comparison to the other tracks.
I ended up ranking this one pretty low just because of the incongruity of the name versus the theme. It's called an elegy, which is, like a somber, reflective song, often a funeral-y kind of thing. So I'm like, all right, this is going to be a sad funeral-y song. And then the reverb-drenched guitar kicks in. And then the synth saxophone kicks in. And the gentle synth pads. And I'm like, all right, let's turn the lights down, make a trail of rose petals to the grave, get funeral-y.
I mean, it was hard for me to rank it low because that...
You do like sexy instruments.
I do like sexy instruments. And also, I mean, that reminds me so much of Gary Moore on Parisian Walkways with his collaboration with Phil Lynott solo. So essentially a Thin Lizzy track, but not called a Thin Lizzy track. And so I'm like, oh man, do I want to rank something that sounds kind of like Lizzy low? I'm like, but there is better songs. And so it broke my heart to do so, but something has to rank lower. And that's my reasoning for it. It's just melody, not as strong as I would have liked.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking of songs I ranked low, next one is near the very bottom of my list. The Villagers Chorus. Traditional song.
Why low?
Because the vocals don't sound very good.
Oh, they don't? Oh, I don't know. There's a rawness to it. I don't know. I dug it because it sounded... This one is the one that probably reminded me the most, just in general setup, of the Hymn of the Faith from Final Fantasy X, which I'm obsessed with. I actually still hum that to myself whenever I'm, editing. And this sort of had that vibe to me in a way of, just... unprofessional singers singing a song in congruity. I kind of liked it.
I think it was just I sensed a little bit of pitchiness and poor enunciation from it, and that's really hurt it. And another song on the list were just whatever male vocalist they got were just not doing it for me. But then later on, it ranked lower on the list. But the Ryudo Awakens is essentially this song, but I think done better with, better instrumentation behind it and better vocals. And so this version is just like a pitchy, not as good version of it.
They did the song 3 times, didn't they?
Yeah, they
the closing track was this again.
Yeah, it's a motif that got repeated throughout. And it's a good motif. Like, the composition is good, but just the vocal arrangement on this track just... sounds very lacking energy, lacking vibrancy, and just it unfortunately did not do it for me, and so that's why it ranked so low. So I like the composition, but this one, the execution was so bad for me, I had to rank it pretty low.
Mm-hmm.
I put it in the middle. It seemed okay. As an all right song, nothing really jumped out about it. The only thing that seemed particularly of note to me is that there's no women in this village, I guess, or women aren't allowed to sing the traditional song. That's rude.
Yeah, they aren't as progressive as some of the other villages nearby.
But it's a prog rock guy.
Progressive. I see what you did there. I understood that reference.
No.
But that ties into the next track on the list, which is Nanan Village Placid Nature, which also features those same vocals of the villagers towards the end of the track. And so I really like the track up until the point the vocals kick in, and then those vocals kill it for me, and that's why I ranked it so low. Like, whatever vocalist they hired to do these 2 tracks just did not do it for me and really hurt it as just a pure music listen. So maybe in the context of playing the game, I would have dug it. But even listening to it 6 or 7 times, trying to let it grow on me, it still didn't.
I guess as part of my bias in this is going to be in there a little bit, just because this is one of my favorite RPGs of all time and has my favorite combat system of any RPG of all time. So much of that excitement for each new town is going to permanently reflect a little bit. So I can't help but I can't fully disconnect myself. I still thought that this one was pretty cool. I'm glad both these tracks are right next to each other, though, because they're very much in parallel, in my opinion. The fact that they even reuse the chorus.
And once again, like the village theme itself, I think is very good.
Yeah.
But then when those vocals kick in is when it really hurts it for me and it makes it not pleasant to listen to. And then the next track, I'll say the composition is good. So I don't think anything is wrong with how it was written. I think it's just purely the execution just didn't work for me. So I still think it's very good. It's just, I want a little bit more out of the performance.
See, I put Nanan Village like way away from this one. I liked Nanan Village a fair amount. That the only real complaint I had with that is it should have probably swapped with Nightmare Village, just in terms of like musical themes versus title of the song. That one with all of the distorted synths and a minor key sounds like a really good theme for your Nightmare Village, rather than the vaguely Middle Eastern one. That's problematic.
Yeah, it's slightly problematic.
Yeah, exactly.
I guess it's Japan, so Midwest.
Yeah, I mean, who knows? Once again, it's hard for us to really gauge the context of these towns, having not played the game, and just having to imagine what they're like in our head. Like I said, I did do, like, as far as YouTube clips, I think I didn't even watch any YouTube clips. I just watched the trailer on Steam. And maybe I think one review of the game on Steam from IGN, and because I wanted to still mostly judge on the music, but get just a taste of it. But it definitely looks like I said, like a cool game. Next up on the list, we have The Mythical World. All right, so Steve and I seem to like this more than Max did. Max, why is this one lower on the list for you?
The only reason this one's so low on the list to me is it felt like to me like it was trying to be, I don't know. It felt like it was trying to copy a lot of the tones of Final Fantasy I, a lot of the big heavier tunes of like, this is this big grand open adventure about to go on, and this felt like it was trying to mirror that in a way, and maybe it's just off put me because of my previous love of Final Fantasies, but I just Mythical Worlds for me does not quite stick for me. I don't know why.
Yeah, this was sort of mid-low for me. I think it's a fine piece, just better songs on the soundtrack. Steve ranked it the highest.
Yeah, I think I put it mid-high. I like that piano tone. That's, atonal pianos are always fun.
Yeah, it's good piano tone. I think the melody's fine. It's just, once again, better songs on the soundtrack. But there's some discrepancy on this track that's nuts, because Steve and I ranked it very low, and Max, you ranked it very high. We have Valmar next on the list.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, this was my fourth from the bottom. This was Steve's sixth from the bottom, and you ranked it pretty high.
Yeah, it was number 10 for me. Yeah, I love how evil it sounds, and I feel like they managed to kind of have a really dark energy to it without feeling like it was too much. Because I know sometimes in these, like Final Fantasy X as an example, goes too far. Like whenever the bad guy shows up, he's like, "Hello, it's time for me to eat souls," and the background's like, "Da da da da." This felt like it was actually being dark and having some really dark energy to it without just feeling way into the cartoonish levels of it. And that's, I don't know, I really dig it.
See, I felt sort of the opposite. I thought this was more cartoonish and silly and just so dastardly evil, like Disney Saturday morning cartoon evil, where I just couldn't take it seriously. So the way I would describe it, like if I was saying you have to be a fan of the genre, and like most of this album is danger, this is Sleazebees, which is like a less good hair metal band. You have to really love hair metal to appreciate at all.
Oh yeah.
And so if you like the genre, you can handle this track. But even as someone who's really into the genre, this one was a little bit cheesy even for me. And I listen to some really cheesy music. So if something strikes me as cheesy, it's got a heavy dairy content, and this one definitely it struck me as a bit generic. Not like it didn't actually make me feel a true sense of menace. And maybe it's because I'm comparing it to other things around it. So like a lot of the Bandai soundtracks of the same era have sort of a similar vibe to it. And, I'm also comparing it to other JRPGs, but as far as like a menacing villain theme, this one just did not do it for me.
See, I get what this song was going for arrangement-wise. It's, we've been reinforcing these themes of, this is Valmart's theme music, and then, when Valmart finally reveals himself, this is the full version of it, and it works as that. It's a better realized version of those songs, more expanded, has more movements, does more stuff. It's just, it wasn't a very good tune to start with. I think it needed just a stronger, better melody.
Yeah, I'm comparing this. If you look at something like Sephiroth's theme, and I'm not talking about One Winged Angel, I'm talking about his actual theme.
Yeah, the bottom, bottom, bottom.
I'm comparing it to stuff like that, and this one unfortunately just really fails in comparison to just some of the great villain themes, or Kefka's theme. I'm playing Final Fantasy VI with my wife right now, and great villain theme for Kefka. There's all these great villain themes, and this one, I would not put on my list of great villain themes. And that's not to say that Valmar might not be a fantastic villain.
Well, no, you were. I feel like you guys bring up awesome points, especially because I feel like Valmar is definitely supposed to just be like the overarching shadow. You don't see him that much. He's just kind of a concept. And I guess it's that I really love this song as a concept. I love the beats and the notes, even if all of it together does kind of get glued into a bit of a hodgepodge.
Well, it's like Xenogears, where you have villains who are largely concepts and just sort of appear out of nowhere. That's another one of my favorites, and I think that has stronger villain themes than this one. I think just something about it just screams, unfortunately, I don't want to use this harsh word, but it screams generic for me. And I think there was
generic villain trademark.
Yeah, and I feel like there was potential for this track to be a lot better. It's not bad, but I don't know. It just strikes as generic for me.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah, it's some one of those things that I guess from a musical background, especially, y'all probably see not just that it has flaws, but how it could have easily been better. I get that.
Oh man, I see that about my own music all the time. Like, oh shoot, why did I pick that melody choice? Bad call.
Why does this song I wrote suck? Why am I a bad person?
No, yeah, what am I doing?
So next up on the list.
Before we move on from that, I'm sorry that I did not get around to getting the drop of Brad Neely saying, Valmart, the Scar artist. The closest I have is,
your dad is a Dracula.
So we'll have to settle for that. You might have noticed that I've been pronouncing it Valmart the entire time because Wizard People Dear Reader is amazing.
It is pretty great.
All right, next song.
All right, so next up on the list is They Didn't Even Get a Chance to Fight Back.
Oh, what a bad title.
All right, no, here's I have not played the game, but here's what I predict happens. Max, tell me if I'm right. This is what happens if you beat an enemy, like win a battle perfect, no damage, and then the song plays, like during like the screen where they let you know like what stats you gained after the battle, like what your items and EXP are.
If I remember correctly, I believe this is actually the level up song. You know how some of the Final Fantasies, it'll play a victory song and then it plays a different victory song if it was a battle where you leveled up? I want to say that this is the level up song.
Okay.
That makes the name even worse because you probably got hit during your level up fights.
Oh, I know. Yeah, that name literally, I think it's just what do they call it? English, where it's like it's a direct translation of a Japanese sentence and it doesn't make exact sense.
See, I thought this was like a perfect in Mortal Kombat where they're like, perfect. Excellent.
Well, they don't have a song for that, but they actually they say separate stuff because the game actually has full voice acting, and they actually talk in battles and grunt in battles, and they'll at the end, if you flawless, they'll like do a special pose and go, "Ha! You gotta practice if you want to beat me."
Yes,
that's so like Street Fighter old school fighting game of a victory statement.
But you know what?
RPG where you just killed some goblins.
Yeah,
exactly. Here's what I love about that
dead guy.
What I love about that cheesy kind of voice acting
is great.
All right, so Max, have you played Xenogears?
Yeah.
Remember how there's no voice acting up until like the very end of the game, and how Street Fighter-ish all the voice acting is? He'll be back. I know he will.
Betrayal. Yeah.
Like That's what I'm imagining for this game, having not played a second of it, and I really hope that's the case. Like, I'm expecting it to be less cheesy than that, but still like towards that direction.
It's everybody is a little bit of a hardcore trope. So there's like a little kid who learns magic that you team up with, and it's definitely voiced by like some woman in her 30s. So it's like, hello, look at me as little boy number 2. And then your bird friend has an old man voice for some reason. So it's like, oh no, how are we in such a precarious situation? Like, what's going on?
Birds are known for their exceptionally long vocal cords. Also, their 2 packs of cigarettes a day.
Yeah, exactly.
Actually, I'm pretty sure crows can be convinced to smoke.
I'm dead inside.
Just beatnik crows.
Yeah.
I have a poetry reading. You should come to that.
Yeah, I actually keep a flyer under my left wing. Let me retrieve it.
See, now I'm just thinking about all the goth kids who are really into The Crow. And so that's just my first thought, is like them smoking cigarettes. Like, Brandon Lee would have been a huge star, man.
Now I'm picturing a crow wearing corpse paint.
Awesome.
All right. Next up on the list, we have A Memory of the Gods full version. So, how to compare this to the opening version?
It's better.
Yeah, I mean, they're both very similar. Just this version has more stuff to it you can sink your teeth into. So, but I enjoyed it quite a bit. I like both versions. I can see why someone might prefer the menu screen version more, just because it's cutting out the other bits. It's the Trump edit where it just leaves just the bits you want, just the fight scenes.
Yeah.
But I still enjoy the full version too. I think both are very good.
See, I think those edits, as you describe them, are what make the full version work better. The vibe I got from the first version is that it was, it looked like they were going for an overture kind of vibe, but they didn't actually have time to really do that, so they just crammed a bunch of stuff together.
Oh, see, I thought the overture for me was opening act is what felt like an overture. Because that had a bunch of different little themes from throughout the game, and this didn't really feel like an overture. It just felt like hey, here's some music, isn't it pretty? Nice menu screen music.
But I think the full version like smoothed over the rough edges and transitioned a lot more smoothly between the different ideas.
And it feels more epic. That's kind of the reason I like the full version more. Is it definitely seems like it has a point to it, a weight to it. I don't know. It's definitely longer and gets more time to stretch its legs.
Well, next up on the list, we have The Garden of Dreams, aka The Mysterious Girl. I recently played Final Fantasy IV The After Years, so I just, in my head, just picture the green-haired girl from that in this. Mm-hmm. That's just my context for it. It's all right, that green-haired girl is just causing mischief again.
That zany green-haired girl.
That zany green-haired girl.
Always dragging people into her evil well or whatever.
That's what she does. So...
Is this supposed to be a scary garden?
I'm trying to find it. Garden of Dreams, The Mysterious Girl. Hold on a second here. I'm pulling the track list up on my computer at the same time, just because trying to memorize 46 tracks, I have to see how long the tracks are. Where did I put that one? Mysterious Girl. I'm trying to remember. I think that's when you're on the moon. You go to the moon for a short time. And
okay, all right.
Well, what's really weird is
I love how this is early game, because this is like on disc 1. So the moon is like, oh yeah, you just do that like at the beginning.
Well, this being on disc 1 is a little bit weird. I think you go to the moon pretty close to the end. But what's really weird is when you go to the moon, you don't wear spacesuits or anything. You literally just get out of your spaceship and walk around on the moon and fight some monsters.
So FF4. This is the green-haired girl from FF4 After Years, because she's also hanging out on the moon.
This is So this is Garden of Dreams. Yeah. So this is just one of the much longer and deeper songs, and I like it for that. But I think I just put it high on my list because I felt like it was so well built.
Yeah, I think this one had a pretty decent melody. I put it right around the middle. Other songs I like better than it, but it's, like I said, musically just gives me that FF4 After Years vibe, which came out after this. It's quite possible they're like, hey, let's rip this off.
Yeah, well, especially because I mean, Grandia as a series was completely dead at that point by the time the after years came out. So they were probably like, okay, we can pay homage to this. No one's gonna get mad.
No one's gonna even notice.
We can
Yeah.
rip off that game that ripped off our thing.
Exactly.
Wait, which came
exactly.
first?
So,
The Final Fantasy green-haired girl, or
the green-haired girl. Well, the green-haired girl that I'm referencing came after this.
Oh, never mind.
But going to the moon and just breathing and being whatever came before this.
Right.
But then they did it again in the sequel,
great artists steal.
right?
I've been forgetting to do
Yeah.
that the entire time. This is the most appropriate episode to use that one.
It is. Oh my god, I love that soundbite so much.
Right? Don't we all?
Well, see, that's a very special edit that I made because I spliced some of the laugh together so it gets nice and high-pitched at the very end.
That's good.
Special lipstick exclusive version.
Ooh.
They
Oh, sorry.
they did this weird game a couple of years ago called World of Final Fantasy, where you basically these little chibi time travelers kind of, and you go through all the different Final Fantasy games as these cutesy little kids. And you actually go to the beach in Final Fantasy X, and at one point one of the characters is like, "Man, this view is so gorgeous. It just makes me want to chuckle to myself." Ha 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 ha! And the person's like, "No, stop! Don't do that here."
That's pretty great. That's on my 2 playlist eventually. I think that's one of the games my wife and I would enjoy quite a bit. So,
I thought that was Kingdom Hearts.
no,
Is there a very similar scene in one of the Kingdom Hearts where you're a bunch of chibi versions of the Final Fantasy characters hanging out on a beach?
All right, so there are kid versions of Tidus and Waka and Selphie on the beach, but they aren't laughing like that.
Yeah. Well, and you maybe mix it up because there's the scenes, like they talk about like how you're required to be happy, and they're being silly about it. But in Kingdom Hearts, they're like, this ship runs on smiles. But yeah, no, the laugh scene is from Final Fantasy X. There's
Yeah,
like a
I know
scene
that.
where, yeah.
I was just confused as to whether the chibi version of that, whether that was... Because I remember seeing what I thought was Kingdom Hearts, somebody playing that scene at some point.
Yeah. It all gets very convoluted, which I
Right.
think is the point. Speaking of convoluted and repetitive things, we have That Which Lurks in Darkness 2 next on the list.
That which lurks in darkness, lurk harder.
The lurkening.
All right, we've talked about these tracks quite a bit, so I'm just going to say the one thing I noticed different about this one is they have a clock ticking in the background.
Yep.
Does anyone else have any commentary? Can we just move on to the next one?
Not a fan of the clock, but yeah.
I like it. As dumb
You
as
don't
it
like
is.
Pink
that
Floyd, dude? You referenced Money earlier.
It's true, I did.
I just say real quick, I think that clock is such a clunky sound effect there, but I actually dig it.
Yeah, no,
That's fair.
I enjoy it. I think it's fun. Next up on the list, we have The Broken Seal. Wow, Steve, you ranked this really high, and Max and I did not care at all.
Yeah, this was probably the one that I ranked legitimately the highest. The one that I actually ranked highest. I was definitely cheating on, but
Yeah, you were being snarky
I was
and
being
sarcastic with
very
your number
facetious on my choice for number one. I'm not good for democracy. No, yeah, I thought that this was meant to be sort of the follow up for the That Which Lurks in Darkness series. That this was when I'm assuming the seal is broken and Valmart actually emerges. And I thought this was a good representation of those ideas. There's a build up and release of tension, and there's some epic parts that imply that once he's actually out, he's doing stuff rather than, just lurking. The lurking thing is cool and all, but you don't need too much lurking before you want the bad guy to actually do something.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, with this kind of villain, its entire thing is that it's a vague, demonic, it's more of a presence than a personality. And so that's kind of, you don't really want it to show up until the end, like these kind of presence villain, because they're meant to be sort of alien and foreign and not even able to really communicate with you on any kind of rational thought level. This is all very visceral and emotional, where you just recognize it as, that is alien, that is the enemy, I want to fight it. In the sense of just like, where you just get very uncomfortable, just like staring down a crocodile.
That thing looks funny. I want to fight it.
Well, it's something that just you can't relate to on an emotional level. You just know that thing wants you dead and you want to defend yourself against it. And so with that kind of villain, it makes more sense for them to lurk because you can't engage it in a dialogue.
Maybe
really.
the lurking song should have been, I don't know, better then.
Well, yes.
I guess if, as Max was describing, it's just sort of a 15-second blurb that you're supposed to see during a brief scene when you pass by the chunk of the bad guy, then yeah, it's fine. But expanded into 3 distinct multi-minute tunes, it's a bit much.
Next up on the list, we have Live, Live, Live or Live, Live, Live. I'm not sure. Max, which is it?
Live, Live, Live.
I read it as Live, 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 just like a desperate, like, we got to do this kind of sound.
I didn't know if like someone was like hustling people to go to their show, like handing out flyers, like, come check us out. We sound like Minor Threat. I wasn't sure if they were trying to get people to show up to a show or if they were just wanting to embrace life.
See, I was getting a Love Live vibe from it. I thought this was going for a J-pop kind of thing. So yeah, hustling to get somebody to go to your show. Where is it in my notes? I know I put it somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, I enjoyed this tune a lot. This one was one of the tougher ones for me to rank because, once again, surrounded by so many good songs. But at the end of the day, hey, good melody, catchy, put me in a good mood, something I would listen to in isolation from the game. Yeah. I give it a thumbs up.
And it does have sort of a J-poppiness to it. And that's kind of what I liked about it, is it definitely just has that like real, I don't know, real upbeat, real energy. I like it.
Do you think 90s era prog rock composers in Japan like think of J-pop as J-pop specifically, or do they just think of it as pop music?
I'm sure they just, so their vocabulary is a little bit different. I've definitely read articles. Their music isn't split apart the way our music is. Like, it's just music. Like, the song that's popular there is popular to everybody. Like, pop and rock are all one thing, and just it's on every single radio station at once. Like, different stations are playing different songs, but they're all sort of playing the same genre. So sometimes it'll be like a Duran Gray, like gothic metal song, and then it'll be like Poofy Yami Yumi will pop up and be really like bubblegum rock. So I've always read that it's just the way it is over there. Is everything is everything.
So they're less.
I want to hear a radio station that does that. Actually, it sounds amazing.
I know, yeah.
They're less genre divisive than the United States.
It is, and people say they actually like it more. Apparently, liking music in Japan is much more uniform because everybody is, at the time, everything is popular to everybody. So apparently, like, one person will be listening to a song on the subway, and everybody in the entire subway will literally be humming along because everybody is into that song at once right now.
I kind of like that. I think the divisiveness of particularly the American music culture, where there's a lot of music snobbery, like classical musicians.
Lots of gatekeeping exclusions.
Yeah, like the 3 worst in terms of snobbery are classical musicians, jazz musicians, and metal musicians.
Punk musicians.
Punk musicians are snobs, but they're of those bunch the most likely to welcome you in to party.
Yeah.
Like metal musicians and jazz musicians, they're gonna be hard gatekeepers. Classical musicians, they're gonna be gatekeepers, but they're gonna be really excited if you give them money. So they'll sort of give you a pass more than the other ones.
Yes, yeah. Country and punker, have that exclusionarianism, but if you show up and say I like this genre, they'll be like, okay, cool.
Yeah, they're not going to ask you about it
until you do something to demonstrate that you're a poser. Yeah,
right.
Whereas metal people are going to be like, okay, can you play this though?
Like, you like metal? Name me 5 Motorhead albums.
Yeah. Exactly. That's always been kind of my problem, is that I'm not super into music. My whole family is, though. My father owns literally almost 2,000 records. He's been a super big music collector since like the 70s. My older brother plays like 13 instruments. So like he's super music, and I'm the one guy who's like, I enjoy video game soundtracks.
I play the radio.
Exactly.
Well, hey, video game soundtracks, there are some amazing ones. There is a lot of musical intricacy in a lot of these soundtracks because a lot of these composers are basically guys who are really into prog, so they're really good at their instruments and good at composition. And, this is another great soundtrack.
I think part of the reason I've always loved video game soundtracks and stuff like this is I feel like there's a real fun desperation to stuff. Like video games are made on such a tight deadline. They're constantly making levels and dropping in new audio for the different voices and stuff. And so many of these soundtracks feels like they also had to make that on such a strict deadline of being like, okay, like this town needs a song in 20 days. So you just got to make a song up right now. I don't care. And I like that. I feel like there's definitely like it feels like they're building the bridge while people are walking across it. And I like that.
I will say this. If I had a full-time music job where I had to come with a song in 20 days, like this is the best gig ever. That is so low pressure.
Like I have 20 days to come up with a song. What am I going to do for the other 15?
Yeah,
the
exactly.
Other 15, you mean like the other 19?
Right?
Yeah.
19 and a half.
But I think they also end up changing stuff last minute. Like there's always the story of the guy who translated Chrono Trigger had to translate it in 72 hours or something. And it literally made him check himself into a hospital afterward, like a mental hospital, because just literally trying to translate Japanese jokes into an equivalently funny English for 72 hours straight just drove him temporarily insane. So some of it's lax and then some of it's in a big hurry.
Well, I'll say this. The guy who did Chrono Trigger, that guy knocked it out of the park. And I'm going to say this right now. I like American Frog with all the, oh, art thou, and old English speak. I know he's supposed to be rude in the original Japanese, but it's like how American Dragon Ball Z is actually better than Japanese Dragon Ball Z, and all the changes they made were better. That's how I feel about Chrono Trigger. Just any Toriyama work, don't keep it faithful. Change it for America, and it'll be way better. But next up on the list, after that tangent, we have Memory of the Gods OG version. Do we really have anything additional to say about it? Because we kind of touched on both versions when we talked about the other one.
Yeah, it's good. It's definitely just the opener. That was definitely supposed to just be like a powerful title screen.
Yep.
It's like when they play the Lucas Arts logo right before the movie. Like, yes, we get it. You have sound effects.
I like the idea of a powerful title screen, just like big block fonts, epic music.
Are you ready to save the game, bitch?
Save the game. I just put in the memory card, right? Game saved.
Did Dreamcast have memory cards? I'm so bad.
They're actually the most unique memory cards ever. They're called VMUs, visual memory units. They actually have a tiny screen on it. When you plug into the controller, it would save, and you could actually pop the memory card out and play separate games on it. There were certain games, like if you saved your game in Sonic, you could take the memory card out, and there's this tiny controller on it, and you could play a game with these little creatures called chows and level them up.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
Well, hey, that is once... I feel like Dreamcast... and actually Sega systems in general tend to be kind of underrated and forgotten, unfortunately. I think the Genesis is probably the most fondly remembered Sega system, just because I think purely based upon more sales, more people bought it. And technology-wise, it was superior to the Super Nintendo.
It was an iterative improvement on Nintendo's offering.
But, I think it mainly came down to... because I played a lot of games on both those consoles. I think the Super Nintendo overall just had a better games library.
Oh, yeah. It's interesting. I did some research a bunch of years ago. I've read a bunch of books on this, including Blake Harris's famous book, Console War. And something you realize is that Sega was really only underrated here in America. Sega was way bigger over in Europe and giant in Japan and stuff. So it's weird that Nintendo in America during this 8-bit and 16-bit era was king. Every single person had to have an NES, an SNES, and a Nintendo 64. Whereas how many people did you... Yeah, exactly. I don't think I saw a Sega Saturn until I was 25 years old. I'd never seen a Sega Saturn.
I'd seen a Sega Saturn. I admit, I totally jumped ship PlayStation era. And
same.
Have been kind of Sony ever since. So, and N64, that controller just annoyed me. Why would a human design this? This is not efficient in the slightest.
So fun fact before we move on, they actually designed that. They built 90% of Mario 64 with no controller. They're literally just testing it on keyboards. They designed the Nintendo 64 controller just for Mario 64. That is completely it. So that's why,
Of course they did.
different buttons like control the camera and stuff. And that's why it doesn't make sense for a lot of stuff like racing games and stuff, but it only makes sense for that one game.
That's a very Nintendo thing to do. I like how that company has consistently been full of bullshit since the beginning. Except like the Super Nintendo era is like this odd outlier. It's like, just here's a bunch of really quality content, no gimmick.
Yeah, well, and it was funny because people were actually mad in that book, Console Wars by Blake Harris. They talk about the fact that people were actually upset with Super Nintendo. They had to make sure Super Nintendo was amazing because so many people already owned the NES. Everybody owned the Nintendo Entertainment System. And so it's really hard to tell people like, okay, that thing is still playing great games, but you need to buy this new $300 machine, which is going to play equivalently great games, but look better. So they really had to make sure that those first 100 games that came out for it were amazing to win people over.
And there's no cross compatibility, so you're going to have to buy all new games for this system.
Which people were super extremely mad about, which is part of the reason why you can actually buy an adapter that lets you play Master System games on your Sega Genesis. They specifically did that to one-up Nintendo.
Well, it didn't really work out in the long run, though.
I know, right?
Backwards compatibility in consoles, it's always been weird. Is that a thing now? Are consoles pretty good at backwards compatibility now? Or
Isn't it just Xbox?
Just Xbox. And it's something that's being talked about a lot now because Sony has actually gone on record saying they believe it's unimportant. They said backwards compatibility is a feature gamers ask for but never use. It's like a quote that's thrown in Sony's face a lot now. Like the PlayStation 4 may have 80 million consoles sold, but they basically murdered the PS3 to do it.
I mean, yeah, that's always been something that Sony's been bad about.
Yeah.
PS2 was pretty compatible with PS1, but I remember when PS3 came out and people were like, I can't play my PS1 games at all, and my PS2 games look terrible.
Well, it actually, so the PS3 could play PS1 games and it looked good, but only one model could play PS2 games, and a lot of them broke. And most of those broke. It was a more expensive model. If you can find those today, they're worth like $600 to $800.
Almost makes it worth it.
I know, right?
That's actually the reason I just got the PS3 for Father's Day, because we were talking about getting a PS3 or PS4, and the PS4 isn't backwards compatible, and I want to play Final Fantasy 13. My PS3 broke before I got to finish it, and so we're like, hey, we'll get a PS3 instead so we can play 13 and then, move on to PS4 later.
Yeah.
But if PS4 was backwards compatible, I would have bought one instead of buying a used PS3. So there you go, Sony. Incorrect facts.
You lose. Good day, sir.
I mean, you're still going to get my money eventually, but by that time, PS5 will be out.
Yeah.
Do you have a way to read your PS3 discs on your computer?
No, the emulation still, because the PlayStation 3, the internal architecture is 5 asymmetrical cores. It's hard to emulate that.
That's fair. Oh yeah, that was the one they broke MD5 with.
Yeah.
The who's it? The Navy? Some branch of the military had their supercomputer, which was really just a stack of 300 PS3s.
Yep.
And a team rented out some time and broke MD5 encryption.
And there's no picture of it, but people have built a facsimile of what that probably looked like to see just literally a bunch of fans and a bunch of PlayStation 3s on shelves and shelves and shelves.
Speaking of the military, the next track on our list is Siren Kingdom Announcement, The March.
Mm-hmm.
Transitions. Transition.
So I ended up doing a redo of my list. That's where I emailed you. I ended up moving that a little bit lower on my list just because, as cool as that song is, it for some reason doesn't feel like it fits the rest, because I know that's supposed to be probably a town theme. It doesn't feel like it quite fits the rest of the town theme. So even though it's a good song.
Well, yeah, this is the announcement, the march. So I don't know if it's the
I thought it was
theme.
a fanfare.
Yeah.
Parade.
It sounds paradey, but I think it's literally just a part of the town that sounds like that for one cutscene.
Ah, interesting.
Is there a parade going on during the cutscene? Or is it just like a chunk of town that has...
I think there's some confetti and some people standing around, but to call it a parade would be a bit much.
Well, I'll say this. This one reminded me of sort of the stuff from Chrono Trigger and Final Fantasy VI, melodically. just those big brassy castle themes, like Figaro Castle and Guardia Castle, and this just, got me deep in the nostalgia gland. And I'm like, yes, feeling this. Very, very castle-y theme. I'm all about it.
Deep in the I got punched right in the nostalgia gland. I'm gonna need a minute. Ah,
It hit me in the childhood.
But yeah, I mean, does it fit with the rest of the soundtrack? Absolutely not. It's awkward and out of place, but it fits very well into a genre of music that I like, so I gave it a lot of points. That's really all I have to say about it.
Yeah, it's good. I guess I just like so many of the other songs that sound similar better, but it is a great song. Yeah,
I put it mid towards the top side of the middle. I thought it was pretty solid. It was a little bit long for what it was, for what I thought it was, I guess. I thought it was like the king coming out to a fanfare and making some kind of announcement. But I guess if it's, actually like an extended cutscene hanging out in a town, then I guess it makes sense that it goes that long.
Right, I was fine with it. I dug it musically. It's I actually think you ranked it the highest, Steve.
All right.
Hey,
because I misunderstood it, apparently.
Well, here's this is one I think is definitely the biggest discrepancy between having played the game and not having played the game. The closing theme, Cancao do Povo, is the next track on our ranking.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, I understood this is the tying up loose end song, seeing what's going on with all the characters, epilogue. Just musically, I thought they were better tracks, even though I liked it quite a bit. But had I played the game and actually saw the scene that this was associated with, probably would have ranked it higher. I don't know if I would have ranked it as high as Max did, who ranked it very near the top.
Yeah.
But yeah, Steve and I pretty much ranked this mid-bottom. And so the reason it's up this high is totally just Max's vote.
It's the vocals. The vocals are what win me over so hardcore with this, is that this is just like an ending credits song. So it's kind of just like, congratulations, do a victory lap, you've won. But I really like the vocals. I just think they're super, super cool. They sound so like, they sound victorious. And I feel like it's hard to have victorious sounding vocals. And this actually captured that for me.
So can you explain what's up with the Portuguese?
There is no explanation for that. No.
Also, I looked up Grandius, and that the closest translation I could find was great guys, which, considering how often that motif appears during all the Portuguese lyrics, that can't be right.
Well, yeah. Maybe. I mean, we were just talking about Guy Man Dude. Maybe he had something to do with this soundtrack. Maybe he's the guitar player.
I guess. Or it's, what would Japanese Portuguese Portuguese?
Well, there is definitely
name for a language.
There is an air to this game of it almost feels like Latin or maybe Mayan influence, because a lot of this is finding these ancient ruins that Velmar is locked up in. So I do think that the composer probably just picked a random language. Each of the Grandia
romance language.
Yeah, because each of the Grandia games takes place hundreds of years apart from each other, totally different civilizations, totally different cultures. This is the only one that really kind of leans into the Portuguese angle.
And, in fairness to Japan, they just picked a foreign language that would be different to their listeners. So it's like, whatever, just pick something.
The Wikipedia was saying that actually, Portuguese is a fairly accurate description, that that Portuguese is apparently pretty bad and pronounced with a lot of Japanese inflections that don't really make sense in the original language.
Well, it's sort of like I actually found a very clean translation of the lyrics from One Winged Angel from Final Fantasy VII, and it makes no damn sense. It literally says, come down, let's all go down with me. It's like, what? But you're in the sky. We're literally fighting a giant angel demon in the sky. Whatever, fine.
I mean, it, fits in well for, 70s progressive rock, though. If you told me that was a Deep Purple lyric, I'm like, yeah, okay. Makes sense.
I am down with that, sure.
Yeah, why not? All right, next up on the list, we have Grandia Sanctuary. I ranked this one pretty towards the bottom because it wasn't super big on the melody. I was like, that's all right. I don't have too much to say about it. When we were talking about the difficulties of remembering a massive soundtrack, This one, I'm not really able to picture it in my head right now, despite having listened to it a bunch of times. And most of the soundtrack, I can picture the song in my head just from the title.
French horn.
Oh, French horn. Yeah, it's all right.
Yeah.
It sounds very very churchy. Like it takes place in a cathedral, obviously.
Right.
Yep.
And I
Matches
don't know.
that vibe well.
I liked it because it has those like echoey. It has like an echoiness to it. That sounds really full. It has like a really like big sound to it in a small space. So I feel like it manages to like convey emotion in a really cool way.
I mean, this is one of the ones where I think this is one I'd need to play the game to really appreciate.
Yeah.
But as it stands, still, I don't remember disliking it, and I obviously, didn't rank it at the very bottom. It's, I think, 7th from the bottom. So still not...
That's pretty low.
I mean, pretty low, but I don't know. I remember it not being bad, but just there's so many better options.
Oh, yeah.
It's like when you go to a restaurant and like your buddy's like, man, try this side, and you got it, and you're like, man, I know there's better sides in the menu. I've been here before. Why'd I get that? Like, it's all right, but I'm probably not going to order it again.
See, I would describe this one as being like French fries. Like you go to a restaurant and they have solid fries, and your friend's like, they have good fries. And I'm like, yep, those are good fries. It's sort of mandatory that they have them, and they accomplish what they set out to do. Maybe they have something more amazing than that, though. But I think this, it's a Sanctuary song. It does what it sets out to do. The only complaint I have about it is those French horns were bad.
Yeah,
They should have gotten better samples for that.
I will say this era of video gaming has maybe the cheesiest sounding instrumentation. As much as I love it, this era is probably the cheesiest in terms of like production and sound design.
Mm-hmm.
And that is part 1 of our discussion. Be sure to tune in next week for us to continue to talk about Grandia 2.